The concept of a default budget is often misunderstood. The Newton-Kingston Taxpayers Association presents this simple explanation because we believe informed voters are the key to effective democratic government. The school fiscal year is July 1 through June 30. The default budget for the following year is set in January. The business manager for the school district formulates the default budget according to standards set by the state of New Hampshire. She removes all one-time expenses from the current year's budget and then adds all contractual and legal obligations for the coming year. Some examples are contracted salary increases, contracted transportation cost changes, insurance increases per contracts in effect, and state-mandated retirement costs. The typical reductions are capital expenses that were paid for out of the current operating budget. Then the school board adopts the default budget and it goes on the ballot in March as an alternative to the approved proposed budget. For the towns, the fiscal year is the calendar year and the default is set in December. The boards of selectmen develop the default budget in the same manner as the district, according to New Hampshire laws called RSAs. Every year, the voters have two budgets to choose between. One is the approved new budget proposal and the other is the default budget. Every March, the voters choose between the proposed budget and the default budget. The school district's proposed budget is developed in a process that begins in April and goes through January every year. The school board sets budget goals for the administration. The budget committee reviews historical budgets and expenses to get ready for budget preparation. The administration develops a budget proposal and presents it to the school board and to the school budget committee. The school board reviews the proposal and makes its recommendations to the budget committee. The budget committee reviews the school board recommendation, historical data, and the superintendent's proposal and prepares and presents a proposed budget for the voters at a public hearing in January. Following voter input from the hearing, the budget committee finalizes its budget proposal. Again, a similar process is done in the towns. In Kingston, there is both a board of selectmen and a budget committee. In Newton, there is no budget committee and all the work is done by the board of selectmen. The next step is to present that budget proposal to the voters at the first of two voting sessions called the deliberative session. This is a town hall type meeting that takes place in early February. The budget that comes out of the deliberative is the proposed budget that goes before the voters in March at the polling places. Voters then choose whether to accept the proposed budget. If they do not, the default budget goes into force for the coming year, which begins on July 1st, and the cycle starts over again for the next default budget. One question that often comes up is what about one-time purchases that happen after the default budget is finalized, later in the fiscal year? The answer is that they do not come out of the default budget, ever. If a one-time expense happens earlier in the fiscal year, it gets deducted from the default budget for the ensuing year. But if money is spent on something like a new truck or a new roof or a high school vestibule in May or June, it does not get removed from the default budget. So you may ask, when do the one-time expenses from later in the year get deducted from the default budget? The answer is that they do not get deducted. The next default budget is based on the next fiscal year. There is no look-back period under the law.
What is the solution, you may ask? One alternative is to have all proposed one-time expenses be separate warrant articles instead of a part of the proposed operating budget. This was done for the first time in many years in 2017 for the school district. It is almost always done with the towns. A warrant article is the name for all the proposals that appear on our local ballots each March. The proposed budget is one of the warrant articles. Any warrant article that passes goes into effect for the coming year. The money appropriated is spent at any time during the fiscal year, and there is no effect plus or minus on the next year's default budget. If a warrant article does not pass, New Hampshire law says no means no. That money cannot be spent on the proposed item from any other source that year. As a result, a failure will not impact the following year's default budget either. We have in our school district years of failed proposed budgets. We also have years of one-time capital expenses that were spent on what some call year-end spending sprees for the district. When the district has had unspent appropriated money at the end of their fiscal year, they have often spent some of it on deferred one-time capital expenses. Taking care of our physical assets is important. The only problem is that the way the law is written means that the default budgets get inflated year after year, because these one-time expenses do not get removed. It is vitally important to attend the deliberative sessions that sets the proposed budgets in February and then to vote for it in March. All decisions on the wording and dollar amounts of all the warrant articles to be on the ballot in March are made at the deliberative sessions. This has been brought to you by the Newton-Kingston Taxpayers Association. To learn more, see our website or Facebook page. Thanks for listening. An informed voting community is the core of democracy.